And good afternoon and welcome to Conversations Off the Couch. I'm Ruth Reinhard and I chat to amazing people around the world who are making a difference in the world but also doing things differently. And I'm a little bit excited because I have Helen Callanan here in the studio with me today, and we're going to be talking about I guess we're talking about end-of-life doulas, we're talking about dying our way, we're talking about a whole heap of things. Helen, good afternoon and welcome to the couch, or off the couch.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruth. It's great to be here. I've been really excited about this. I was really captured by your saying of, think bold, not old. And it's so in line with how I approach end of life. And I'm really honoured to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. It was interesting, Helen, because when I had the first thoughts around think bold, not old, it was about thriving in your third act and, that over 50s, over 60s.
Yes.
But then as I got more into it, it was about thinking bold in our thoughts and doing things differently, thinking things differently. Doesn't matter how our parents did it. It didn't matter which generation did what or whatever. And I think this is a really good segue into what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So let me just give a little bit of an update on your bio to all our listeners. So Helen is a practicing end-of-life doula and the founder and owner of Preparing the Way, and leads Australia and New Zealand premier end-of-life doula training. So Helen does a whole heap of things, industry training, she educates, consults with organisations. You're training and practicing in traditional Chinese medicine, you're a Reiki master, you're studying with a meditation master teacher. Helen, I'll be here all day. And just what really sings to my heart, you're a country girl, originally from the Riverina in New South Wales, but now hanging out in the beautiful Victoria in Surrey. So, wow, that's absolutely, every time I read your bio, I kind of think this amazing lady and how lucky I am to have you here. So Helen, let's start off. What's an end-of-life doula? Because it's a little bit foreign here in Australia.
Yeah, it is. It is, Ruth. A lot of people are like, huh? It's actually doula is D-O-U-L-A, and it's a Greek word. And originally it meant, to translate, and still does, to slave. But we're not slaves. We've, if you like, upgraded it now to being like a person of service. People may have heard of birth doulas. But if we want to just cut it right back, so it's a non-medical role. However, we work alongside other practitioners. So, for example, at birth, there's a midwife often, right? And the person might be in a birthing suite in a hospital, or they're having a home birth. So a birth doula is there to provide support, options, education, and really walk alongside, the person having the baby or the couple having the baby and through that process. Same with an end-of-life doula. We're just working at the other end of life, obviously. So right through, like, I educate people who don't even have a diagnosis. Maybe people want to know, what are my options later? And I know that that's something you and I have discussed before, about the incredible range of things there are available that most people don't know about. So we look at options. We can do planning ahead of time. These things you're hearing a lot at the moment about, for example, advanced care plans and directives. That's about so that we can plan for a time when we may not be able to speak for ourselves. And we also provide support, education, resources to help people, number one, work out what is it that you want, at the end of your life? How do you want it to look? What are your preferences around that? Do you know you've actually got preferences and choices to make, that you can? It's not just a cookie cutter, but I think a lot of us don't know that. So, and as I often say, we're like a companion. We're walking alongside people as they take this journey. I'm not there to advise or direct or to, tell anyone what they should do, because you're the expert in your life, not me. So, but I'm here to help a person really unpack what are my options, what actually matches my values, what suits my family best, what really means something to me, and then support a person in fulfilling those preferences.
So Helen, Why End of Life Doula? What was it that attracted you to that kind of work?
Well, I sort of fell into it in a way. When I was doing my natural therapist, I did a degree in Chinese medicine, as I said, and then I became a Reiki practitioner and teacher. And I did that for many, many years around Australia and taught and travelled. But in doing that work, I started to work with people who were very ill, who were terminally ill and who were dying. And I found a level, first of all, I felt comfortable in those spaces. But not only that, I very quickly learned the privilege and the preciousness of those times and how so many people were scared, Ruth, and felt overwhelmed and were confused and had all of these options and things thrown at them, and often felt they were, if you like, a bit swamped in that whole medical path, right? And so by me being there, and I could sometimes, be the liaison between the nursing and medical staff and help explain things and help ask questions, or they wanted to take their person home, so that they could die at home. I could help them arrange that. I was sitting doing vigil at people's bedside, being there while as someone was dying, so they weren't alone. So I started all of those things. I didn't even know there was such a thing as doula, to be true. I was just doing what was needed in the moment. I felt like I was filling, if you like, a gap in the services provided. Because, our medical world, who I deeply respect and admire, they're so pressured now. And I have so many nursing, palliative care nurses, aged care nurses, RNs, AINs, ENs, all come, to my training now, who are almost heartbroken because they can't do the nursing of their heart, of what they signed up for now because of budgetary constraints. The ratio of patient to client to nurse is so tight, that there's constraint now. And so the doula, to me, we're able to fill a lot of service gaps. And as I say, we provide authentic continuity of care. So we can be with someone from before a diagnosis, and then as a diagnosis happens, right through, all the way through until after death and into bereavement and supporting the family, that is left. And so to me, sometimes I work with a family or a client for 2.5 years, as they travel this journey. And I'm like a companion. I walk alongside them, provide support. And to me, the end of life, it's just such a privilege, Ruth. It's such a precious, precious time. And it's a time that I think, to me, to have someone by my side who's saying to me, Helen, you've got this. Helen, you can do this. I know it's messy and I know it's scary and I know it's confusing, but I'm here with you. And to help provide support for the family and help facilitate those tough conversations, and just, someone who cares, someone who has the time to invest with that family and to provide that support they need.
Not often lost for words. I just, every time I hear you talk, I kind of think, I look back on my own experiences, and because you don't get to my age, and I've been around the earth a few times, so I've had quite a few experiences where I've been honoured to be in those final moments. Some that I wish I had been, particularly with my dad. I was there for my mum, and I always remember after my mum, both my mum and dad died in the country, but I remember after being with my mum after she died, and it was all very rushed, and okay, I had to run home, get whatever she was going to be dressed in. Then I couldn't find the dress that I wanted her in, and it was just a nightmare. And then I got back, and then I was told, oh, well, no, you can only have 5 minutes and you got to go. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go and do some hospice work. I felt really drawn to it. I didn't have any idea about doula work until about 12 months ago when I started to make some initial inquiries. And I really loved the work that I did in the hospice. And one of the things, Helen, that really stood out for me was that they could talk to me. So I'd go and volunteer kind of on a Sunday morning. So I get to do the drinks trolley at Sunday lunch. It was amazing. I can pour the best whiskey and dry, I can tell you, because one of the patients taught me how
And
to
I
do
love
it.
that little cheese and tea.
I think it was kind of in favour a little bit. But, you know, I kind of thought, this is amazing. But the one thing that really made me quite sad in my heart was that those people that were coming to near the end of their life could talk to me, complete stranger. And when I said to them, have you had these conversations with your family? And I said, oh, no, they don't want to talk about me dying. They won't accept that I'm dying. I'll only upset them and whatever. And I think that's probably very much the mantra here, in particular in Australia. As you say, we've outsourced it. But if you were to give some advice to those that are caring for people, whether they're loved ones or friends, what's your biggest advice that you could give to them in their caring? I think.
Yeah. Well, look, I think
you need to hear that.
You know, yeah, I think it's you know, you just hit on something there about, you know, a lot of people don't want to talk to their family about it because they don't want to upset their family, or you know, sometimes the pressure's coming from the family for a person to have treatment and they don't want to, or vice versa, right? And I think, you know, one of the biggest pieces, thing I see that makes the most difference is when people are willing to listen to each other. The time to listen and to understand that each of us is unique, each of us is individual. Even though you might be my mother, you know, you're your own woman. Do you get what I'm saying? And so to start to honor each other as beings and as human beings and as individuals. You're not just my mum or my partner or my child. You know, those are precious relationships, don't get me wrong. I'm not making light of that. But you're also your own being and you're sovereign in that. And so if I'm able to give you or the person that I'm with, you know, and this is sometimes what I'm able to support people in, have these conversations, like when they say, Mum wants this, and and I go, so tell me, why do you think Mum would want that? Oh, well, she thinks da-da-da-da-da. Okay, why do you think she thinks that? It's like just to get people to slow down, to just stop and try looking at something from someone else's point of view, someone else's perspective. And I think the biggest gift, and sometimes the hardest gift, is for us to let go control, to let go of attachment to the outcome that we have in mind as, well, you should be doing this. Right? Because, like, I've always got opinions about everything, right? And as I say, I'm right about them. However, when I'm doing my doulaing, it's like, because you're the expert in your world, I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's like, even with, you know, I think about my sister, right, who I live with, and we're very different. And how my sister approaches things and how I approach things, totally different. What we want at End of Life, totally different. But it's not appropriate for me to go, well, hang on a minute, you should want this, or no, you should do it this way. It's like, that's her way and her wishes count. And I think if we could just take a step back in our own attachment to the way we think something should happen, I think that's a great gift to give people in our relationships. You know, whether it be around death and dying, or whether it just be, it's just, you know, as I say in the training, you've got to start leaving people alone, right? Let people be and make their choices and have their life and make their choices and honor those, you know.
We don't always have to be right in a situation, and I think that's a segue into what you were just saying, I think, Helen, from where I'm sitting, is that just keep the mouth shut and let the journey unfold as it needs to unfold. And because I want to do something my way doesn't mean, God, there's a song in that, isn't it? And
a few,
doesn't mean, particularly during doula work. And I think I know for me, Helen, to be at somebody's bedside in those final hours and the final moments. It's the biggest honour. But
Yes.
I have to tell you, you've only got to go to a dinner party and the conversation, if you drop the D word
Right,
into
yeah, oh
the
yeah.
whole dying thing, like if you want to see a dinner party go flat really quickly, bring up death and dying and funerals, and they just kind of, switch it off. So why is
what,
that?
Ruth, I'm going to call you on that because here's, there's a lot of talk about that it's a taboo subject, right? Here's what I tell you I find all the time, because I used to agree with that. I've had to change my mind, because when people find out what I do, honestly now, 95% of them want immediately to tell me a death experience they've had in their life.
Okay.
People, and you know what I think? I think that's a little bit of a furphy now. I think because there's so much more media presence around death and dying. Look, I mean, we're in this COVID pandemic, deaths and ICU and all of that's all over our screens all over the world. I think, it's a much more prevalent and present conversation now. Advanced care planning is very big. We're meant to go to our local doctors and do that, put those plans in place, because, the thing is, we can't make choices if we don't know what our options are. And I find that people do want to talk if they feel like it's a safe place to talk.
Yes.
I think that's the key, is do they feel like the person's going to listen to them? Do they feel like they're going to get heard? And I think as human beings, it's one of our fundamental things we want is to be heard and known and seen,
And Helen, I know in some other cultures that often their loved one stays in the home. They're looked after, they're cared for. I know my daughter-in-law's dad in the Philippines, that's what happened. He was at home. And when I was travelling in Ireland some years back, driving around, I come across quite a few funeral processions leading a house. And so the casket was in the car ahead,
yes,
in the hearse, and then all the family were walking behind it. And I thought, well, how cool's that? And I thought it was just a one-off. And then as you go around Ireland, as one does, you kind of think, oh, that's happening all the time. So this is very normal. So what's happened in Australia? Have we ever been like that and we've just outsourced it as time's gone on? Or
I think you're right on the button there. If you think about it, back when my grandparents and great-grandparents, they took care of their dying and their dead at home. That was how it was done. You laid them out in the front room, and the neighbours and family came and gathered and visited, and there was a wake or some type of, sort of sitting in. The ladies brought food. They prepared the body. They bathed the body. They dressed the person. The men made the coffin. Then the body went in, and then they went and buried their person until, cremation became one of the ways that we disposed of bodies. And I think what I see happening now is, and you used the word outsourced, and that was the word I first heard the Groundswell Project used, who are leaders in death literacy here in Australia. And they talk about that we outsourced death and dying and aging around 90 years ago. So we basically sent our dying and our dead to hospitals, to aged care facilities, to now palliative care units, and also to funeral directors. Now, nothing wrong with doing that really, intrinsically. However, it had a cost. And that cost is that we now no longer have the competence nor the confidence to take care of our own dying and our dead. And what a lot of people may not know, Ruth, is that there's now a movement to, if you like, what Libby Maloney from Natural Grace calls reverse pioneering. In other words, we're grabbing back the past. Because if you think about it, Ruth, you and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will have heard about the saying, the silver tsunami that's coming. So all the baby boomers, hands up, I'm one. So us baby boomers, right, that are aging and ultimately will be dying, there's a wave, a volume of aging and dying coming, the likes of which has never been seen. There's already insufficient hospital, PAL care, aged care beds. For the wave that's coming, there'll never be enough. A death and dying is going to have to go back into our homes like it used to be. And so this to me is where the death doula, the end of life doula, has the capacity to be there to bridge those gaps, because we're not delivering palliative care. That's the specialty of the nurses and the doctors. And we can't, and as I say, I can't do my job without really good medical palliative care. But palliative care as an approach to care is a very broad. Actually, there's a lot involved in it. It's not just medical, although I think we've come to think of it as that. And so, to me, we have to be able to take care of our dying dad at home. And as I said, there's a movement starting now called the Compassionate Communities movement or model. And it's where, as communities, we've got to start upskilling ourselves and our communities to start taking care of those in our community. You know, Professor Helen Callanan here, who's an Aussie, but he lives in the UK now. He talks about the old neighbourhood watch program. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like that was a community movement, right, to address safety in our neighbourhoods, right, and where we kept an eye out for each other. Well, the compassionate communities model is a little like that, but it's whereas I have to keep an eye out in my community and how we together with businesses, and we start to take on who around me is grieving, who around me has a large caregiving burden, who around me has a diagnosis and is approaching their end of life. How can I contribute to that, to lighten that load? And I think, you know, what I see over and over again in the privilege of this work that I do is when there are family and friends and community involved, that it's actually quite an uplifted experience. The times that it's most hard is when there's too few trying to do too much. And it becomes this burden. Whereas when you've got when you've got enough support and resources, and you've got place to talk and to download, you've got emotional support, you've got spiritual support if that's what's important to you, whatever it is, when you've got that, you know, you think about it, we're incredibly resilient. And I think about, you know, you hear about the times that we've been through the fires, like what everyone went through with that, right? And then we had floods, and you know, they often talk about those times when adversity hits can often be the time that we're at our most powerful and wonderful, and we're our most inclusive, and we just rise to some higher ground, you know, and we come together as a community. Then when it's all over, we go, okay, I don't even know my neighbours now, you know. But whatever.
We're seeing that in the pandemic, aren't we? I've been tracking the kindness.
Right, me too.
Yeah, yes. And I'm looking at all these things and wonderful things that people are doing and receiving more so than anything. And I kind of think it's a bit like washing the hands. Haven't we supposed to be been doing that all along? You know, now we've taught everybody how to wash their hands.
Totally get it.
Let's teach them how to die properly.
But you see,
so Helen, it's amazing.
Sorry, just can I cut across that, because I think you've just again hit right on the point. This is my point, that the only reason we're like this about death and dying, in my view, is because we've got it all, I was going to say but you know what I mean. We've got it all turned around, and I don't best not swear too much.
That's all right. Not on Prime TV.
That, you know, we've got it all twisted. We live life like it's life versus death.
Yeah.
Like death is something to be kept at bay at all costs. To be avoided. Well, I hate to tell you, it's a 10 out of 10 stat.
Yeah.
We're all going there, right? And if you think about it, when we plan for things, when we talk about things, when we look at what our choices are and put things in place, it takes a lot of the fear away, right? Death is one of the chapters of our life. And if we embrace that, if we can go, okay, this is coming. And as I say regularly when I'm talking to people, it's like we plan our weddings, we plan our births, we plan our retirement, we plan our holidays. But the one thing that's for sure coming, our death, we go, nope, not going to happen to me. No, not going there. We make these homemade hard times. It is coming. And so to be able to look at and talk with our families about it and grieve about it if we need to, and be a bit scared, but what are we scared of really? Usually we're scared of things like, I might lose control, I might be in pain, I might be dependent on someone or people. You know, those are our fears. There are ways around those things. If you get in there and have a look, and you can make choices and have them documented and share them, and then you can approach, you know, your end of life without all of that fear and actually embrace it, you know?
Yeah, and people think if they talk about it, it's going to happen, you know, like, and I kind of think it's going to happen anyway, so let's talk about it. But, you know, one of the things, Helen, when I was training with you was, for me, that really hit the heart on that final day was that when it's such a beautiful experience with family and song and music and touch, I'd have to imagine that the grieving for those that are left behind, it looked like it was, I mean, I didn't see them 12 months down the track or anything, but it looks like it was like it's like that closure that we all talk about. I don't know if that's the right word here, but you kind of feel, oh, okay, it's okay to let go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sad. And yes, but I could imagine that it would have to be, dare I say it, a healthier grieving.
Well, it is. And you know what? Yeah, it absolutely is. And I've been very lucky to both study with and also work alongside, and now they co-deliver training with me. An amazing holistic funeral director. The company is Natural Grace, and Libby Maloney and Jackie Morgan, who's their holistic mortician, who I've got to work with a lot, in their whole team. And as I often say, and they shudder when I say it, but if I had my way, that, you know, they'd be the only funeral directors on the whole planet. And I mean no disrespect to any others, but the quality.
I want them to come to dinner. I want to yak their heads off.
Exactly.
Because the whole idea of a holistic funeral, and we're not talking about just, you know, organic burials or things like that.
No. Well, I think what it brings back to what you were talking about, Ruth, about the difference it makes to those left behind. So what Natural Grace talk about is having family-led after-death care, family-led funerals. So what that's saying is, it's not where the funeral director comes in and goes, okay, you will be going this way and you'll do that, and you're going to pick that coffin, and then you're going to go there, and the service is going to look like that, and then you're all out the door, and best you hurry out the door because the next one's coming in behind you.
Especially in the city, yeah.
Right, yeah. So we're not talking that. We're talking about, okay, who is your person? Who is your person that is now deceased? And sometimes the people come and plan their own because they want to be involved in this process. But if not, it's like, so what are their values? Who were they as a person? What would you like to create as a family, as a community, as a group, whatever, that is something that honors them? That's measures, it's a measure of who they are, that it matches their values, who they were in the world. And so, you know, it's a bit like, you know, sometimes that might involve driving them in the old potato truck, you know, to their burial, because that's how they got around the farm all the time, you know, rather than, oh no, they must have a hearse because that's what you do. You know, it's about what is it that's true for your person, and having the celebrations, the honoring of life, whatever the ceremony is, or the memorial or funeral, whatever it is. And some people want a big mass and a traditional thing. That's great. There's nothing wrong with doing that if that's what matches the being and the person and the family. And so what I watch over and over again, because I now do this type of work with families that I work with, that it's about, I see the families come together, uniting in creating a beautiful and fitting ceremony or celebration for their person. And so grief is still present, of course. They've lost someone very, very dear to them. But what I see them walk out of that experience with at the end, when it's all over and done and dusted, that they put their hand on that and they go, you know what? That was really amazing. They would have really loved that. And the feeling of satisfaction for people that they gave this beautiful gift to their person, and that their person was appropriately and fittingly cared for. The grief is there, of course, right? Because they've lost someone they love. But they're much more, they stand taller. It's like they're empowered, if there's such a word, they're empowered in their grief, you know, and they just walk away, you know, differently to how people, because if you think about it, death takes someone from us. And then when we've been looking after them for maybe ages if they've had a terminal illness, we might have been looking after them for this long period of time. They die, they're taken away, then they're taken away again by the funeral director. We might see them or not. And then we're left with this arms full of grief. Whereas when we could take care of our person and plan it ourselves and be involved in it as much as we want, you know, Natural Grace, you know, just do this extraordinary work where they encourage the family to find their expression of this. And they just come in from the back and just fill in the gaps. And it just, it's exquisite to be a part of. It's really, I find it uplifting, even though we've often got a wet face, you know?
Well, that's just the eyes leaking. And I think
yeah, exactly.
I certainly want you around when I have this conversation with my 3 children, when I tell them that I'm going to be cremated in a shroud in a wicker basket. So if you're listening, my 3 children, that conversation's coming to a theatre near you really soon. So, Helen, I love this subject.
I know, I do too.
I think
people say to me sometimes, Helen, people think I'm weird. And I go, why? Because I really get excited around death. And I go, me too.
Yeah.
You know?
And I did a bit of this stuff when I was in government, but I've always had a fascination about it. And I think the calling, and I'll let the cat out of the bag, you had alluded to it earlier, I'll let the cat out of the bag there for my listeners that don't know, is that I've just become an end-of-life doula under the guidance of this amazing lady who's our coach and our mentor. And I feel like I've won the lotto, you know, like I really feel that I come home. As you know, Helen, I'm already a marriage celebrant and a funeral celebrant. To me, this is the charting off that I can be there as part of the journey as an end-of-life doula and to make a difference in the world in that way. So, Helen, you have your own training business as well, and just forgive me, and it's called Preparing the Way. I should know that, I've just been training there. So here in Australia, and you're the lead for that here in Australia and New Zealand, what would you tell somebody who loved what they were hearing today, thought it was perhaps a calling?
Yes.
What kind of qualities and thought processes would somebody be having if they wanted to step into this work?
Oh, look, I say, Ruth, a lot that I get to work alongside the best of the best, because I see over and over again people describe that, I don't know why, I just feel called to this. You know, you use that word, I think.
Yeah.
And some people, and I say this, you know, I feel comfortable around death and dying. I do. I just do, and I always have. And there's something in this for me that this to me is not scary. It's natural, it's organic, it can be a very beautiful process. And I get to be around people, and if I can help someone lighten their fear or uplift their or expand what they think is possible, or go, really, is that possible? Wow. And they're thinking about their death, I go, that's so great. So to me, the most important skills that an end-of-life doula has, in my view, is the capacity, number one, to be at work on themselves. You know, I have to be able to get out of the way, right? Number one. I've got to be able to listen, and I've got to be able to let people have their own experience. It's not about, and believe me, I'm a fix-it girl, right? I'm really good at fixing this, and I have to not do that, because there's nothing wrong, there's nothing broken. Mm-hmm. I'm there to accompany, to walk alongside. I'm not an expert. I'm no oracle. I don't know everything. I have no interest in knowing everything. What I am interested in doing is looking at someone and saying, I've got your back. I've got your back. I am here on your team. I am here for you, alongside you, and together we've got this. And with your family or whoever else is around. Sometimes there isn't anybody else around. And so to me, if any of your listeners have that feeling, and it comes from here, it's not about what we know. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's not, it's about this. Because I often say, wow, great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know where to find it. You know, we're all working this out together, but it's about being willing to be a companion and a champion for people, championing people, you know, and what they choose and what their life is about, you know, is so important. And I think one last thing to me is about that. So often I think we talk about dying, and so it's this heavy thing. But to me, share this experience with death, if we've got time for that. Do we have time for that? Yep. Because he taught me a magical thing, which was, and it's about that, about living, not dying. And so, Bruce, I'm going to tell you a very short version. This was many years ago, back in the 80s, and he was my first experience of death up close and personal. And Bruce was, in my world, was dying at home. It was about a month before he died. Not that we knew that at the time. I was massaging his feet because that helped the pain in his head. And I'm sitting on the end of the bed crying. And he looks down the bed at me and he says, "What's up with you?" And I said, "Well, I'm sad. You know, you're my best friend. You're dying. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm messed up about that." And he looks down the bed and he says, "Well, cut that S out." Swear word. "Cut that S out." And I was like, "What?" He said, "I'm not dead until I breathe my last breath. Until then, I'm alive. So get over it." And honestly, Ruth, it was like someone threw a bucket of cold water at me. I am so grateful to Bruce forever for that lesson, because I think this is a way of approaching it. And I talk with this about with my clients and families that I work with. Let's get on with living with your illness or whatever's going on, or your aging. Let's get on with living with that. And you'll die when you die. Let's not relate to life like I'm dying of this illness. No, let's relate to it like I'm living with. Yeah. Right? Because those tears that day, they were for me. They weren't for Bruce, right? And I think it's about people are living right up to that very last breath. Yes, our capacities might be diminishing. Yes, we might have less capacity and ability to do things, and we might be getting sicker, but we are alive and relating to the people in our lives as living and able to make choice and express themselves, and empowering people like that. That to me is where the magic is, if for anyone who's interested in this work, is being able to relate to people as living with, not dying from.
Yeah, I love that one you said earlier. You know, it's like real dying is really just that split second that it happens when we stop breathing and we don't come back breathing, isn't it? And it's whereas often if you're given a terminal diagnosis or something like that, we've actually just started dying way back, and we haven't, you know, we're just not enjoying that part of the life.
Well, and I think what happens too is often, sometimes the person themselves with the diagnosis, they want to focus on living, but everyone around them is focusing on that they're dying. So they're not getting heard, you know, or sometimes they're lost in I'm dying. And so it's about, you know, being able to listen and hear each other and share and talk about these things. You know, I remember Jessie from the Groundswell Project, she said one day, I loved it, you know, she said, we don't need to normalize death. It's normal. It happens to everybody. We need to socialize death and dying. We need to talk about it, right? We need to talk about it. We need to share our fears and concerns. We need to go find out and sit down with our kids and our brothers and our husbands and our wives and our families. We need to talk about it, because you don't, you know, as we said in your little promo, you know, just as you don't get pregnant from talking about it, you don't die from talking about it either. Because otherwise I would have been dead years ago, because I've been doing this a long time.
Okay, Helen, we're going to finish up, but I want the top 3 pieces or things that people can do to prepare for their death before a diagnosis.
Okay.
Top 3 things.
3 things. Okay. Advanced care directive.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll put links. Can we put links up?
Yeah, we absolutely can, please.
A couple of options for that. Advanced care directive. There's the Groundswell Project have a 10 things checklist.
Can we put that up as well? Can we put that up as well?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, we will. And start the conversation. We'll put some links up around that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, sit down, sit down with a cup of tea, glass of wine, and start talking. You know, there's even conversations you can have with your family around dinner. You know, there's things called death over dinner, and there's a deck of cards called the death deck, and you can get it and you sit down and ask questions about each other.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do. Dying to Know Day is coming up, August the 8th.
Death cafes are around as well. I follow that movement. And just having those respectful conversations about, you know, what's always been a really sensitive subject. And I think when I did my training with you, I confess up now, because I've got my certificate. I confess up to you now that when we first started doing the training, we had to go through and tick off all the things that we'd done to prepare for our own death, and I failed miserably. I thought, you know, I'd done the organ donation, I'd done the enduring power of attorney, and I'd done the will. I thought I was done, but apparently there's like about another 15 things that I could have been doing that I haven't done, and the Advanced Care Directive is certainly one of them. And it's about making it easy, you know, for family coming in behind, because it's, you know, it's a pretty emotional time for everybody. So I think preparing before we are emotional, I think that's
absolutely. And it's also about, you know, we did a webinar just recently with Dr. Merrin Cooper, and I'll include the link. She's got a digital online advanced care directive, which is really great. And what's great about that is it's like you can have people, anytime you edit it or update it, an email can go out, you can have it sent to your GP, for example, or to your medical decision maker, or, you know, your next of kin, whatever. And but it's about what are those, if you have, and this is the thing people don't think about, a lot of people at end of life end up in emergency, you know, or they've had an accident or a fall. What do you want the doctors to do? Do you want them to resuscitate you? What is your quality of life that's okay for you? What are your, like, no, if that's what I'm going to be like, that's not okay. Or you have the right to make your choices. And so, you know, being able to express those, and this advanced care directive, there are ways of doing that. You know, what is your quality of life that for you, that has meaning and has you feel like, yep, I'm okay living like that, you know?
And Helen, when we were training, I loved the connection that you've got with Natural Grace Holistic Funeral Directors, and they were heavily involved in our training as well. And my heart just sang, because, you know, I'm a closet greenie. I'm, you know, not always in the closet. You know, you come out and be a bit vocal sometimes, but I loved that that beautiful space, that the integrity of them as a business, as an organisation. We were privy to some stuff in our training that just, you know, had me bawling after I got off camera. But and I thought, wow, this is beautiful. So they're based in Victoria.
Yes,
in
they
Melbourne
are.
in specific, I suppose. Are they? They're
Well,
in Melbourne?
they have two. So their main sanctuary is at Wood End, which is out of Melbourne, but they
Right.
have, I think it's North Brunswick.
Okay.
West Brunswick, East Brunswick, North. I think it's North Brunswick, definitely Brunswick. They have an office there as well.
Oh, wow.
But you can just go to their website. We'll put that link up as well. But they have,
Yeah.
like, if you go on their website, you can see beautiful options for beautiful wicker coffins.
Oh, yeah.
And they work differently to
Yeah.
funeral directors.
Yes.
Anyway, but you can see all of that laid out on the site.
So is that a movement, do you think, that will progress into other states? I mean, Victoria's copping it really bad at the moment, which I think is a bit unjust, but at least they've got these, beautiful things like holistic funeral directors. But is that kind of movement, is it going into other states here in Australia? Particularly Queensland is what I'm looking for. That's what I'm trying to edge you into a corner here. But
look, I think there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of disruption going on in the funeral industry right now. There's a lot of people out there doing great work.
Yes.
There's also tender funerals. They are a community-led, not-for-profit.
Okay.
They're now starting to what they call scales. So they had their original place. Now they're starting to open up little satellite ones. That's another thing to look out for. But I think it is the way of the future, because I think the baby boomers, we are quite vocal in what we want and what we don't want. And so I think the baby boomers, I think you'll see massive change in around aging, end of life, funeral industry, all of those things I think are changing massively now, because the baby boomers are starting to go, wow, what we want. And I think it's really important that we do that. So yes, I think there'll be a lot more change that's happening. As I said, if I had my way, natural grace would be all over the countryside.
Yes, tell them I'll open up an office up here. Tell them I'll be happy to. I love the authenticity of them. I love the integrity of them, and it's no surprise that both of you work together. Helen, I could stay for hours.
I know. I love it too.
We've got a limited time, and I think it's sometime in the future I'll bring you back, and we'll talk a little bit more about the groundswell movement.
Oh yeah,
you're very involved around the world in bringing this now into the forefront of our thinking. I'm so full of gratitude for your time this afternoon. I know it's really full on in your life these days, and you're busy training and being that practicing end of life doula. So thank you so much for your time.
It's been a real pleasure. And to me, this is my happy place. So
I can see that.
I feel grateful to be able to do that, and I hope that what we've shared has been of some value to your listeners, and I hope that they, what I would love is that this talk today, which is what I'm all about, is about uplifting and liberating people around this conversation of end of life. That's why I do what I do. It's about creating more freedom around it, and embracing it and all that's available.
Thank you, Helen. And there you have it. We've had this amazing hour with Helen Callanan, our end of life doula, and I hope it starts a conversation in your life around the way that you wish to die and what that would look like for you and your family. And always remember, think bold, not old, not only in the way that you live, but the way you die and the thoughts that you have. That's all from us, and I look forward to another edition with you later on Conversations Off the Couch. Thank you so much, Helen Callanan. Been lovely to be with you.
Thank you so much, Ruth.